This is a daily ritual in Ypres. It goes back almost as far as the Great War itself. It is the city's way of saying it has not forgotten the thousands of young men who died defending it. Their names are etched in stone. Nearly 55,000 of them on panels here. Hundreds of thousands more on memorials nearby. None of us knew them, and yet many of us are drawn to this place. Perhaps to seek the name of a grandfather or granduncle, or more likely their fathers and uncles. Or simply to be here, to be moved, and to let the scope of what happened here sink in. 55,000 names have a way of doing that. The first of them arrived in a city they had never heard of in October 1914. Many had already fought bitterly in northern France, and yet they were still hopeful the war would soon be over. But the map of the front indicated otherwise. 2 months into the conflict, 2 giant armies were digging in along a line that stretched from Switzerland to northern France. Now that line was creeping north towards Ypres, the last town before the coast. Where it moved to from there was vital to both sides, perhaps even to the outcome of the war. Ypres had become a hinge. Whoever held it held the key to the Channel coast. This city lay in the wrong place at the wrong time, though in that fall of 1914, few would have realized it.
Ypres is a lovely town. One wouldn't think, to see the people talking and walking about, the shops lit up and so on, that fighting was going on 5 miles away. We are ordered to wash and shave to make the spies think we are fresh from home.
Scottish Corporal Charlie Park arrived in Ypres a day later. He jotted down a similar impression.
On the 14th of October, the 7th Division came to Ypres. We had marched 103 miles, of which the last 40 had been covered in under 40 hours. To the weary British, Ypres seemed as peaceful and welcoming as Lyndhurst after a long march through the New Forest. The quaint old-fashioned Flemish town, lying sleepily by the side of a serene tree-shaded canal, seemed very remote from war.
But serious fighting was going on, and was drawing nearer by the day, as Somerset native Arthur Cook noticed.
The Germans have set fire to many houses in the vicinity by shell fire. Most of the houses have been hit, places that have been vacated only a few hours previously by their peaceful inhabitants. God only knows if they will ever see their homes, or what is left of them again.
That was becoming increasingly doubtful. A massive German army was moving towards Ypres. Preceding it were thousands of refugees running for their lives. Gunner Charlie Burrows described the scene in his diary.
October 18th. Moved off at 4 p.m. Past hundreds of refugees. All seemed terrified. They block the roads and we cannot move until they get back towards Ypres. We expect to be busy soon. Our section officer tells us a great battle will soon be fought here.
That great battle started one day later. At stake was Ypres, and with it, the key to the Channel coast.
October 19th. All the people are running for their lives. We have to go back again, so they are pushed into a field on our right to clear the road. As we move on, the Germans start shelling again, and we see the shells are falling all among them. Poor things. Tuesday, October 20th. Go into action at 7 a.m. in a turnip field near a farm. The poor cows have not been milked. A dog chained to a kennel is raving mad. We cannot get near it to help it, and there are puppies with it. We fire at intervals for about 6 hours all told. Heard that the enemy's infantry were attacking very fiercely. The news is that we are slaughtering them.
The following day, thousands of inexperienced German reservists were thrown into the battle near Langemark, north of Ypres. Charlie Park confirmed it was slaughter indeed.
It would be about 8 o'clock in the morning when the enemy came from out of the trees, packed shoulder to shoulder. At 800 yards, we started intermittent firing. It was like shelling peas from a pod. The Germans were so closely massed it was difficult to miss. At 400 yards, the enemy increased the speed of charge, but at the same time we switched to rapid fire with that magical 15 rounds per minute. It was bloody murder. The grey masses fell like ninepins. It was as though those brave men had been told by their ruthless Kaiser that they could walk through bullets.
Thousands of young Germans died near Langemark, but there was no shortage of them, nor of commanders ordering them into certain death. More and more troops were directed towards Ypres instead. John Cole recalls being sent from one frantic battle to the next, trying to hold the line surrounding the city.
We'd had 3 days hard fighting, holding the Germans back. Every man of the 2nd Worcesters was exhausted, and we were relieved to go back into reserve. Those days, there was no such thing as rest. We'd only just arrived when the word came that we were urgently needed to stop another German attack. We were absolutely fed up to the teeth.
But there was no choice. German troops also attacked east of Ypres. What followed was day after day of brutal fighting around the small village of Geluveld, just 5 miles east of Ypres. The Germans broke through the line, but Cole and his surviving colleagues managed to re-establish it.
October 31st. They fled in a solid grey mass, and we watched the boys winkling them out. Remorseless, it was slaughter. At one point in the sunken road, we were firing the machine gun, using dead bodies for cover. We linked up with the Welsh and we did it. We plugged the gap to Calais.
But too many soldiers had been killed or wounded. Their attackers poured in more troops. Ypres' outnumbered defenders now faced enormous odds.
November 2nd. Another day of hell under the continual hail of shells and bullets. The ground is vibrating all day long with the concussion and the continual thud of shells. Men are being buried alive and blown to pieces all around me. Perhaps death is preferable to this infernal life.
November 3rd. We stood too in the wet shell holes and crumbling trenches under the thunder and blasting flashes of German high explosives. There is no need to describe this bombardment except to say that it was the worst in my experience. A few of our fellows broke under it, and one poor chap entirely lost his head and ran back out of his trench. He had not a chance in the open. The earth was vomiting all around us, and he tumbled over in a few yards. A corporal fell near me with a shrapnel bullet in his head. Named men passed crouching and crawling behind me, leaving trails of blood on the ground, on their way to a ditch which led back into the woods behind.
Ypres did not escape the carnage either. Frustrated by their failure to take it, the Germans aimed their guns towards the city. Father Camille de Lara witnessed its destruction.
Jeudi 5 novembre. Le bombardement de la ville reprend vers 9 heures. Joseph Notebart, un excellent père de famille, eut la main coupée. Ses 2 enfants aînés tués, les 3 autres blessés.
Behind the lines, the artillery was suffering as well, as Charlie Burrows recalled.
November 6th, 18th day of battle. We take our guns to another position in a turnip field. Enemies still find our wagon line and shell us heavily, but only with light shells. No damage. They shell Ypres all afternoon with heavy shells. The carnage is awful. Dead men and horses everywhere, and whole villages are wrecked by shell fire from the enemy. The roads have huge craters, which make them almost impassable.
Vendredi 6 novembre. Nuit terrible. Le bombardement ne discontinua pas. 3 personnes furent surprises devant la caserne et mises en pièces. Leurs cadavres restèrent en place jusqu'au lendemain. Plusieurs gros obus tombèrent près de moi au cimetière. Les dégâts sont grands par toute la ville.
November 7th, 19th day of battle. Again being shelled about 5 a.m. Still misty. The infantry are very busy. Expect we soon will be also. Horrible smell caused by dead men and horses which are lying everywhere. Ypres burning furiously. Flames and smoke reach a great height.
La soirée du 7 novembre fut terrifiante. Les obus incendiaires allumèrent le feu en divers endroits au centre de la ville. Bien d'habitations les plus belles furent détruites. Le soir, sous les shrapnels, je parcourais avec mon dévoué vicaire les rues en feu pour voir où nous pourrions être utiles. Plus d'une fois, c'était à la course que nous traversions les rues. Une chaleur insupportable nous brûlait le visage. Flammes comme des vagues rouges soulevées par l'orage.
November 9th, 21st day of battle. We have orders to move at any moment as the enemy are attacking furiously. Our battery is very lucky. We have 1 gunner killed this morning. Heard that Ypres is being deserted by the inhabitants. Thousands of French infantry on the move at 2 p.m. Enemy redouble their attack and we catch it hot. We are again lucky and only have 1 driver wounded and a few horses killed.
Le 9 novembre. Toujours les obus, toujours des départs. La ville a l'aspect bien triste. Bien de maisons sont détruites par le feu à cause de l'absence des pompiers.
November 11th. All quiet for once. Expect they are fed up attacking.
It was the quiet before the storm. The Germans were about to launch their heaviest attack yet. They had every intention of taking the city that day. Exhausted and outnumbered, men like John Lucy knew that their chances of survival were extremely slim.
We were ordered to man the trench. The man on my immediate left kept his head down. I grasped his arm and shook him savagely. "For Christ's sake, get up, you bloody fool. The Germans are coming." He fell over sideways into his face and exposed a pack covered with blood. "Butcher shop," I said to myself. "Bloody butcher shop."
But the line held. Cameron Highlander George Matheson described what happened in a letter to his father.
"We had the Prussian guards break through on our right somewhere. Well, first of all, they shelled right along our trenches for 2 hours. It was pure hell, and we could do nothing. When the Germans did come out of the wood, they got it, between rifle fire, shell, and the bayonet. We were complaining about France being bad, but this is pure murder, not war."
It was murderous on both sides. George Matheson and his colleagues in other units came to sobering conclusions when finding out who was left.
"We are now in billets 20 miles behind Ypres. It was a sorry-looking battalion that came back for our first rest since we came out here. Well, you may know that out of the 1,100 officers and men that came out at the start, we have Major Yaden and about 80 men left."
November 13th. We came out of action at 5:30 p.m. Heard we are going to a rest camp to be overhauled and to get our strength made up. We need it very much and are not sorry to get away from the Ypres sector. We marched down the Menin Road and passed by Ypres, which is still being shelled. 25th and last day of battle, in which we lost our major, captain, 2 section officers, sergeant major, 2 sergeants, and about 20 NCOs and gunners, besides 20 drivers and about 50 horses. Also our trumpeter. A very dear price to pay, but that, I suppose, is war. I count myself very lucky.
On the 19th of November, we were again in the line because a battalion that had suffered worse than ours had to be given a rest. But that evening, the London Territorial Regiment came to relieve us, a relief that was to take us away from that battlefield of Ypres. This time, only 40 men of my regiment were able to march away. The rest were killed or wounded. 40 left out of 250, and only about 3 weeks ago, there were only 46 left out of an entire battalion. I searched my mind for total figures and roughly reckoned that in 3 months, 96 out of 100 had been killed or wounded. I was too weary to appreciate my own luck. The First Battle of Ypres was over, and Ypres was saved. As we drew nearer to the old walled and moated town, we thought it had not been worth defending, for it was already in ruins, and it looked as if every house and building had been destroyed by shell or flame.
But the fight for Ypres was no longer just a fight for a city. Ypres had also become a symbol of British resilience and its commitment to fight on against all odds, and a symbol of sacrifice. In 6 weeks of fighting, the British lost 55,000 men. Every one had been thrown into the battle. Most ended up staying, their name etched in stone on a grave or memorial. Though the cost in lives was high, these men fought their opponents to a standstill. But the Germans still took up positions on higher ground surrounding Ypres. Thus was born the Salient, an area a few miles across, protruding into enemy territory. An area that would turn into the world's largest graveyard in the years to come. "100 years on, the Salient has recovered from the tragedy which befell it. The towns and villages were rebuilt. Battlefields turned back into fields and pastures. The woods, where George Matheson and the Cameron Highlanders held back the Prussian Guard, are now a recreation area. The horror that unfolded here, a distant memory. Geluveld, where John Cole and the Worcesters plugged the gap to Calais, slid back into anonymity, as did its neighbors near the front line. The fields and farms which Charlie Burrows saw being destroyed are being worked again. Langemarck, where Charlie Park and British riflemen held back wave after wave of suicidal infantry attacks, looks just as peaceful. But no matter how accurate the cosmetic overhaul, no matter how long ago the war, one cannot escape what happened here. For that, too many of them stayed here, from both sides. The British in their graveyards, more than 100 of which scattered throughout the Salient. Their opponents on the other side of what was once the front line. The Germans killed during the First Battle of Ypres rest in Langemarck. Here lie more than 44,000 young men, most of them in unmarked graves. The sheer number of names accuses their leaders. Behind each one of these, an unlived life. They too set out with great enthusiasm, afraid to miss the victory that would surely be obtained by Christmas. But they didn't make it that far. Well before Christmas, they were dead and quickly buried in Flemish soil. What remained were the letters home. Letters revealing they were just as scared and disillusioned as their opponents on the other side of the line.
25. Oktober. Was erlebt man nicht in einem solchen Sturm? Man reift um Jahre, der Tod saust. Jeden Augenblick glaubt man, getroffen zu werden. Man ist dessen sicher. Ein Notschrei ist im Menschen, Gedanken mit Trotz und schließlichem Ingrimm. Weg mit dem Krieg, der scheußlichsten Missgeburt der Menschenlaster. Menschen schlachten sich in Massen ab, ohne sich zu kennen, zu hassen, zu lieben.
28. Oktober. Die ganze Kampfesweise ist es, die abstößt. Der Angriff, was ist er anders als der Drang? Hin zur nächsten Deckung davon gegen diesen Hagel tückischer Geschosse. Und der Feind, der sie entsendet, nicht zu sehen. Erst etwas leisten, dann schmerzt auch die Kugel gewiss nicht so sehr.
29. Oktober. Unter einer goldenen Pappel liegt ein toter Kamerad. Auf dem Bauernhof liegt totes Vieh. Kein Vogel zeigt sich. Die ganze Natur hält ängstlich den Atem an.
30. Oktober. Wir liegen mitten im Gewehr- und Granatfeuer. Ein Getöse um uns, schrecklich. Ich werde es meinen Lebtag nicht vergessen. Es ist grauenhaft, wenn so eine Granate über einem platzt. So wie in der Nacht habe ich noch nie gebetet.
5. November. Ihr könnt euch gar nicht ausmalen, wie so ein Schlachtfeld aussieht. Und schon heute, wo es erst einen Tag hinter uns liegt, will ich selbst kaum glauben, dass so viel viehische Barbarei und unsägliches Elend möglich sind. Schritt für Schritt muss erstritten werden und überall Tote, reihenweise. Alle Bäume zerschossen, die ganze Erde metertief zerwühlt von schwersten Geschossen. Und dann wieder Tierleichen und zerschossene Häuser und Kirchen. Nichts auch nur annähernd noch brauchbar. Und jede Truppe muss kilometerweit durch dieses Chaos hindurch. Durch Leichenstank und durch das riesige Massengrab.
There would be no further marching in the weeks ahead. The onset of colder weather brought German attempts to take Ypres to a halt. For the depleted and exhausted British troops, it provided a much-needed opportunity to replace the losses of the past several weeks. Reserve regiments began arriving in growing numbers, along with overseas troops. Even then, there were hardly enough of them to defend the salient. French troops took up positions around Ypres, while their British allies took responsibility to the border and into northern France. Aware that the race to the sea had ground to a stalemate, both sides began digging the final segment of a line of trenches which now stretched from the Swiss border all the way to the Belgian coast. Trench warfare had become part of life in this corner of Flanders as well, and neither side liked it.
To the few remaining old soldiers, trench warfare was somehow unreal, as if a halt had been called in the conflict. We were used to aggressive tactics carried across open country, where the combined movements of active rifle formations, rapid shooting, and a good sense of cover appealed to us. We had been trained for that. We were stultified in trenches and wretchedly restless in any quiet sector of the line. We walked about like cats on hot bricks. War became repugnant, a thoroughly miserable, half-hearted business, a rotten, dangerous kind of routine.
Wenn man im Graben steht und sich nicht regen darf, wenn die Minen und Granaten kommen, so ist das wohl Kampf, aber keine lebendige Tat, sondern das grauenhafte Gegenteil davon. Das ist überhaupt das Scheußliche in dem jetzigen Krieg. Alles wird maschinenmäßig. Man macht mit, aber mit Verachtung und Abscheu vor den Mitteln, zu denen man zu greifen gezwungen ist.
Like it or not, this was the new way of doing business here. And while casualties were fewer than during the brutal battles of the weeks before, shells kept on claiming victims, day after day.
Seit 8 Tagen im Schützengraben. Einer Ruine, in der bei Regenwetter das Wasser rauscht und alles von Lehm und Dreck starrt. Und die auch Schutz gegen das furchtbare Granatfeuer gewähren soll. Ihr ahnt ja nicht, was es heißt. Tagelang, wochenlang im Schützengraben, im feindlichen Feuer leben.
Our trenches were 7 feet deep. We walked about, or moved very slowly, in marl or pug of yellow, watery clay. When evening came and we could get out of it, it took about an hour to climb out. Some of our chaps slipped in and were drowned. They couldn't even be seen, but were trodden on later.
There were many other dangers. With most trenches within rifle shot range of one another, one moment of carelessness could be fatal.
Our new men did not take too well to trench conditions. Casualties were frequent, and sometimes as many as half a dozen men were hit daily without anything to show for it. Army headquarters called it wastage. The men flouted death by recklessly walking in the open and by taking dangerous shortcuts.
Das Leben gilt hier einem Dreck. Man hat kein Empfinden, was es heißt, Leben riskieren. Bin ich doch heute durch heftiges Gewehrfeuer gegangen, eine halbe Stunde weit, nur um mich zu waschen und weil ich Aussicht hatte, 1 bis 2 Zigaretten zu bekommen.
That attitude was understandable. One misstep, one moment of carelessness, just being in the wrong place often meant instant death. And those fortunate enough to survive were constantly reminded of that.
On my first morning in the trenches, I was foolhardy enough to risk my head above the parapet of the trench at a spot where I thought I was safe. I could see the mangled and partly decomposed bodies of cattle and horses and the remains of boys and men. God knows how long they had lain there, to be further mangled and torn in death by the screaming shells which exploded in that dreary waste. My nostrils were breathing in the foul air of rotten flesh, and I dropped back into the trench with a horrible feeling of fear and nausea.
All along the salient's perimeter, thousands of soldiers still lay where they had fallen in earlier battles. Removing and burying them was too dangerous, so they were left.
In that hellhole, one creature came out on top, whatever the result of the skirmish. That creature was the rat. These vermin performed so well in stripping flesh from corpses that they were a protected species, the standing order being that none were to be shot.
On the other side of the front line, rats received less protection.
Nicht einmal die Toten in den Gräbern hatten ihre Ruhe, sodass ein Erlass notwendig wurde, in dem diesen abscheulichen Viechern der Vernichtungskampf angesagt wurde. Für jede tote Ratte war eine Prämie ausgesetzt und es begann ein großes Morden, an dem sich alle beteiligten.
But the winter of 1914 was not spent just hiding from rats or shells. Soldiers were also regularly forced into no man's land to erect additional defenses. It was much needed work, but invariably came at a heavy price. Even more dangerous were the attacks on the other side.
December 19th. It was a tragic day for the Somersets, for we had nothing in reward for the precious lives thrown away in an attempt to gain a few yards of ground, not worth the life of a single Tommy. It is sad to relate that our own guns caused as many casualties as those of the enemy. Captains Mord, Bradshaw, Moore and Lieutenants Parr and Hanson lost their lives. Other ranks were killed, 52 wounded and 30 missing. It has been an awful day and I'm glad 'tis over. The groans of the wounded were terrible, especially at night.
It appeared as if the indiscriminate slaughter would continue into the new year. And yet, less than a week later, something happened that no one could have imagined.
You will hardly credit what I'm going to tell you, but thousands of our men will be writing home today telling the same strange and wonderful story. Last night, I saw a sight which I shall remember to my dying day. Right along the whole of the line were hung illuminations of every description, many of them in such positions as to suggest that they were hung upon Christmas trees.
Soweit das Auge sehen konnte, tauchten beleuchtete Weihnachtsbäume entlang des ganzen Sektors auf.
In several sectors along the Flemish front line, the lights were followed by an invitation.
We discovered a board stuck up in the German trench. We had our glasses on in a minute and read the words in big block letters. Concert, over here, tonight. All British troops welcome.
The Germans followed with ballads which we all, English, Scots, Irish, Prussians, Württembergers, and so on, joined in. It was absolutely astounding.
At 4 a.m, part of their band played some Christmas carols. You can guess our feelings when we heard that. Later on in the day, they came towards us, and our chaps went out to meet them. We did not fire that day, and everything was so quiet that it seemed like a dream.
We were walking between the trenches. At any other time, this would have been suicide. We shook hands, wished each other a Merry Christmas, and were soon conversing as if we'd known each other for years. Here we were laughing and chatting with men whom only a few hours ago we were trying to kill.
Für den Rest meines Lebens werde ich diesen Vorfall nicht vergessen. Da sieht man mal wieder, dass menschliche Gefühle immer anhalten werden, selbst in Zeiten wie diesen, in denen Männer nichts anderes als Töten kennen.
For one brief moment, the men were able to forget they were supposed to be enemies. And they helped each other with those who never made it that far.
Ein Engländer rief uns an, uns in gutem Deutsch zu fragen, ob wir die Toten wegschaffen wollten, die zwischen den beiden Frontlinien lagen. Wir stimmten zu und ein paar von uns Jungs verließen die Gräben gleichzeitig mit den Briten.
The Germans formed up on one side, the English on the other, with the officers standing in front, every head bared. I think it is a sight one will never see again.
But this appearance of sanity in a world filled with insanity was not destined to last.
December 28th, 1914. Dear Mother, I now write these few words to let you know that I'm all right. We had a very merry Christmas considering the difficulties at present. The Germans were very merry. They were singing all night and we gave them a few songs in return. We had plenty of presents sent for Christmas.
There are a few reminders of the Christmas truce along the old front line. This is one of them, in Plugsteert, not far from where Albert Downes was killed. Here, British and German troops laid down their arms for a few days. Tradition holds they even played some football here. Proof, if ever it was needed, that both sides sent mostly teens to the killing fields. Youngsters who desperately wanted to be kids again for a few precious minutes. Winter that year was brutally cold. Frost now became the enemy, and it too claimed victims.
The winter of 14 was extremely hard because we had no amenities whatsoever. It was just ditches, and one was often up to one's knees in frozen mud. You could do nothing about it except stick there. The actual fighting was nothing like it was in the later years of the war, but there were many casualties through sickness and shelling.
The freezing temperatures affected both sides equally.
Ich kann gestehen, dass oft Ekel mich ergreift gegen das Leben in diesem Schlamm und Dreck und das unausgesetzte, nasskalte, vergebliche Arbeiten. Es sind Strapazen, die kein Mensch im Frieden ertragen würde.
But this was not a time of peace. For the men stuck in and behind the trenches, there was no choice but to make the best of it and wait for warmer weather. For a spring, which they hoped would thaw more than their frozen surroundings.